Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the meeting of Perth and Kinross Licensing Committee. I'm Bailey Mike Williamson, convener of the committee, and I'm joined by my vice convener, Councillor Ian McPherson. I'm also joined by other members of the committee alongside Moyna McLaren, Deputy Clerk and Solicitors of the committee, Karen Engelbert, who's the Licence Enforcement Officer, and Jessica Guild, who's the Clerk to the committee. Can I now ask the Clerk to confirm any apologies received for today's meeting and confirm attendance of those in the chamber and online?
Thank you, Convener. We have apologies from Councillor Reid, Councillor Frampton and Councillor Anderson, unless he's appeared online. No. We have some members online. I'll ask to confirm they're present. Councillor Harvey.
This is a present.
Thank you. And Councillor Robertson.
Present.
Thank you. All other members are in the chambers, Convener.
Thank you. Can I ask if there are any declarations of interest in respect of business on the agenda today? I'll take it there are no declarations of interest. Could I ask members if they agree to vary the order of business to hear item 10, review of houses in multiple occupation at this point? Thank you, members. We'll now move on to paper 10, which is this application is on page 125 onwards in your documentation pack. Could I ask Moyna McLaren, Solicitor, to introduce the report?
Firstly, I'd like to ask members if they had the opportunity to read over the contents of the report. Yes. I mean, this is a report just about a proposed change to the fee structure in relation to multiple houses in multiple occupation. The reason for this is that the fees have not been reviewed since 2000. And what's happening is that we're proposing to change the scale of the fees so that there are more sort of layers in the scale to reflect the amount of work carried out by the licensing department, the amount of administration involved. And you can see in pages 126 that at 4.2, this is the old fee structure, and at 4.4, this is the new fee structure. And there's also a proposal of an additional inspection fee because sometimes, officers have to go and revisit a house for inspection, and they're proposing a fee of £80 for that. So the proposal is that the committee approves the revised scales and charges for the HMOs as per section 4.4 of this report. And so that is for your consideration.
Do members have any questions? Do members have any questions for Ms. McLaren? If there are no questions, my motion is to accept the recommendations within the report. Do I have a seconder? Thank you. Are there any amendments to the motion? If there are no amendments to the motion is carried. Thank you. But I request now that the attendees in relation to the cottage 26 Lower Oakfield at Lockyer board to the table. Members, this application is page 5 onwards of your documentation pack. For this item of business, we are joined on the telephone by the applicant, Mr. Jeremy Connell. The applicant's application has been brought to committee today as one objection was received from John McLaren Stewart, who is not present today but has provided further written submission. I will now hand over to Moyna McLaren, who will introduce a report and advise on the procedures for the hearing.
This is a short-term let application. It's been the applicant has been operating as an existing host before the 1st of October 2022. There are no objections from the police or fire and rescue, and what the procedure would be is that because they were being advised that the objector is not present, it would be just a case of the applicant Mr. Connell presenting his case in response to the written objection that has been circulated. Now, I want to add in this case, as a preliminary matter, the objector, which John McLaren Stewart, has actually submitted an additional paper which virtually replicates the original application, which I think if we send it to you, and I'm just going to ask if you're happy that the committee accepts that. I don't know if you could send that. It's been sent. So you've got just to confirm, Mr. Connell, that you have Mr. McLaren Stewart's additional email.
Thank you. I don't actually have it, but I'm perfectly happy to proceed without it.
Right. If you could, I think we'll just send it to you. It's actually virtually the same as the original application. I don't think there's very much difference, but for the sake of doing things properly, we'll try and email it to you just now.
Thank you. I don't want to detain the committee longer than need be. I did try to speak to Mr. McLaren Stewart. I left a message for him, but I never had a reply. So I'm looking at my email now. It may just take a moment. Get mail. Let's see. Nothing yet. Would it be helpful for me to go through this?
Yes.
We're going to read the objection out.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
You want me to read it out? Yeah.
Jessie's going to do it.
Oh, you're going to do it. Yeah, that's fine. Oh, sorry.
So Mr. McLaren Stewart has said the following: my considerations remain the same. 1, Airbnbs in Pitlochry are pushing up prices, making it impossible for young families to buy properties at the lower end of the market. 2, the availability of long-term rental opportunities for families has already decreased as second and third property owners snap up accommodation. 3, the availability of these Airbnb rentals in our town has increased. Visitors who would otherwise have stayed in hotels or B&Bs that directly employ and pay wages of local people don't support the local economy nearly as much. 4, I don't take kindly to the owner of this Airbnb calling me to discuss my objections. 5, the owners aren't even local people. If I remember correctly, they actually live in London. I know there are others who agree with my concerns, but didn't get round to actually putting them in writing.
Thank you, Jess. Could I now invite Mr. McConnell to provide details of his application and respond to the objection?
Thank you very much. If I could just say initially that I spoke to colleagues in the council, and they said that if it was possible to speak to Mr. McLaren Stewart about the objections in advance and save the licensing committee time, it was a good idea to do so, which is why I left him a message. I'll take the arguments that I've got in order, if I may. The first one is the street is almost exclusively Airbnb or B&Bs. Well, while Lower Oakfield, which is the street it's on, may have a number of Airbnbs and B&Bs, this reflects the overall tourism-driven nature of Pitlochry. The town's economy heavily relies on tourism, and short-term holiday lets like my one contribute to its vibrancy and to local businesses, including local hotels and restaurants and the festival theatre, including, if I may say also, which Mr. McLaren Stewart is a director of, and that is a vegan hotel at the end of Lower Oakfield. So we promote Pitlochry. The second concern that's been raised in what I've got in front of me is the safety concerns and parking restrictions on Lower Oakfield. Well, contrary to Mr. McLaren Stewart's claim, Lower Oakfield is not inherently dangerous due to parking. The absence of pavements and parking restrictions does not necessarily pose a safety risk. The road can accommodate 2 cars passing each other safely, and I'm not aware of any documented incidents related to parking. I was born and brought up there. I cycled along the street many times, and it is a safe street. He mentions noise disruption. There's no evidence to suggest that the cottage, it's a 2-bedroom cottage, contributes to noise disruption. As a responsible owner, I go to considerable lengths to maintain a peaceful environment for guests and neighbours. Noise levels are well within acceptable limits, and I'm not aware of any complaints from neighbours. The following measures and guidelines are in place. First of all, guests are vetted by my agent, Home from Home Perthshire, when they book. So she gets the purpose of their visit, knows who they are. And that is to ensure there is no potential disturbance from parties, for example. Guests are mainly walkers, golfers, theatre goers, and those sort of people. Secondly, information which is provided to guests when they book emphasises that Lower Oakfield is a quiet residential area and that neighbours must be respected. We're also specific about parking outside the cottage gate and alongside the cottage wall, not elsewhere on Lower Oakfield. And third, we reiterate the importance of respecting our neighbours' amenity in our written cottage guidelines, which all guests read when they arrive at the cottage. Mr. McCowan-Stewart talks about second homeowners draining the community in Pitlochry. Well, I actively support the local community because I use local contractors completely and services. I was brought up in Pitlochry. I was born in Aberfeldy, brought up in Pitlochry. It's my family home. My father ran a local business in Pitlochry until shortly before he died, and my mother contributed to the theatre and to town hall productions. My family's long-standing involvement in promoting the town demonstrates my commitment to its well-being. If the cottage were not a holiday-let property, my family would use it as a second home. In terms of residency and connection to the town, while I live in London, it is true, my personal history with the cottage is deeply rooted, and I maintain strong ties with the Pitlochry community. I have many family and friends in the area, and I visit regularly with my family, which demonstrates my ongoing commitment. Finally, Mr. McCowan-Stewart mentions noise from holiday revellers. He's a director of Seorsa, which is a hotel on Eastmoreland Road, just opposite Lower Oakfield, about, I suppose, 100 to 200 yards away at least from the cottage. The issue of noise, which he suggests comes from holiday revellers returning to short-term lets from the town centre, is not relevant to my cottage. I take rigorous measures to ensure that guests in the cottage are considerate to local residents, and the cottage does not contribute to the alleged late-night disturbances. If there are any noise concerns, these should be addressed directly with the relevant short-term lets causing the disruption. My thanks to you. That's all I have to say. If there's any questions, I'll be delighted to answer them.
Thank you, Mr. O'Connell. I have a question for you. It's about the day-to-day management of the property and who to contact when that issue arises, if any issues do arise.
Okay, so the person is at Home from Home Perthshire run the property, a lady called B. Stagg. My wife also is completely devoted to the property, and she's on the end of a mobile phone at any time. And we also have someone called Stephanie Dugan, who goes in most days to the property because she lives in the area and she works in town. So we pay her to keep an eye on things on a daily basis in our property.
Thank you. Do any members have any questions for Mr. Connell? Councillor Braun.
Good morning, Mr. Connell, and thank you for your presentation this morning. I'm just really a question following on from the convener's question, really, and I know you've got obviously management company in place, but do the neighbours have the contact details that they can contact if there are any problems?
Yes, they do. I know the neighbours, and actually it's a good point. I will check. There are two neighbours on either side. But the neighbours in Ellangowan right next door have, I know them and they have my contact details. I will double check though that they've got the neighbours on the other side who bought the house quite recently, I believe, that they have my mobile number.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any further questions for Mr. Connell? If there are no further questions for Mr. Connell, could I invite him to sum up, please?
Well, thank you very much indeed for that. I really got very little more to say than that. I've been born and brought up in Pitlochry. It's a place that is very dear to my heart. It's a place that I visit probably half a dozen times a year. We have several weeks if we stay there, and so I believe that what I'm doing and looking after it very carefully, bringing people into Pitlochry is good for the town, and I would ask you please to overrule this objection. Thank you.
Thank you. Do members wish to adjourn for any discussion? Okay, online, I don't see anything online, so my motion is to accept the application for a short-term let as per the papers. Do I have a seconder?
Yeah, I'll second.
Are there any amendments to the motion? If there are no amendments to the motion will be carried. Thank you, Mr. Connolly. Your licence application has been accepted.
Thank you very much indeed, gentlemen and ladies.
And we now move to paper 4, which is the grant of a short-term let licence, which is a new operator for 1 Dunbar Court, Gleneagles Village. Members, this application is on page 19 onwards in your documentation pack. For this item of business, the applicant is unable to be present today, but has submitted a further written representation circulated by to members by email yesterday. This application has been brought to committee today as one objection was received from Peter Kelly, who is not present. I'll now hand over to Moyna McLaren, who will introduce the report.
Firstly, I'd like to ask members if they've had the opportunity to read the paper in support of the application from DSQL Investments, and also whether you've had an opportunity to read over and consider the objector's information that he's provided in support of this application, and that's Peter Kelly's, the information from Peter Kelly. And given that neither parties are present, you have to. It would be up to you to consider the information that is before you before making a decision.
Do members wish to adjourn for discussion? Okay, members, we're going to adjourn for a discussion for a few minutes. Thank you, everybody. My motion is to grant the license for 3 years. Do I have it subject to conditions within the papers? Do I have a seconder?
I'll second.
Are there any amendments to the motion? If there are no amendments to the motion, the license has been application has been accepted. Councillor Braun, you missed a Wakefield statement.
Thanks, Convener. I just really wanted to make a tipping of a recommendation. The property is described as a self-contained flat, and looking at some of the paperwork, one would assume there's a communal entrance. I just wonder if we could put a recommendation on the covering letter suggesting to the applicant that he check to see whether he needs any form of planning permission, as it is a flat and it has a communal entrance. Just for check for him to avoid any future embarrassment should it come to light that it does need it and he hasn't actually applied for it. Thank you. Thanks, Convener.
Thank you. Could I now request attendees in relation to 39 Dunbar Court, Gleneagles Village, are brought to the table? Members, this application is on page 31 onwards of your documentation pack. For this item of business, we are joined in the chambers by the applicants Michael and Veronica Oak. This application has been brought to committee today as one objection was received from Peter Kelly, who is not present today. I will now hand over to Moyna McLaren, who will introduce the report and advise on the procedures for the hearing.
Yes, this is an application for a 3-year short-term let license. The applicants have been operating since before 1st of October 2002, and the police and fire and rescue services have made no objections to this application. Now, the procedure in this case will be to allow yourselves to respond to the written objection, because the objector is not going to be here today, and to speak to your application. And once you've made a presentation in relation to your application, the committee members would ask questions. Then, after that, you've got to give an opportunity to just give a little brief summary. You know, that is the procedure.
Thank you. Could I please ask Mr. and Mrs. Oak to provide details of our application and respond to the written objection? Normally we give you about 10 minutes or advise about 10 minutes. Okay, thank you.
I don't think I need 10 minutes, but thank you. Good morning. My husband and I acquired 39 Dunbar Court about 4.5 years ago, and it was already in use as a holiday let before that, but for exactly how long, I don't know. But the committee will be aware from the papers that it's a small 1-bedroom property with a maximum occupancy of 2. We run all aspects of the business. We do the bookings, we do the bookkeeping, and we put our marigolds on, and we do the cleaning. We aim to provide a 5-star experience for our guests, and as a result, the property is furnished, decorated, and equipped to a high standard, and our pricing reflects this. Our target market is mainly mature couples and those who are visiting the area on business. We do not use Airbnb platform, as we feel that the customers of Airbnb aren't typically in our target market. Most of our business comes from Booking.com, with about 10 to 15% from direct bookings and returning clients. Our rating on Booking.com from 82 reviewers is 9.8 out of 10, and forgive me for mentioning that our score is higher than that enjoyed by the Gleneagles Hotel. I'd like to now respond to the objections raised by Mr. Kelly, who at the time of him writing his email was a neighbour of ours in Dunbar Court, but I note from the committee's papers that Mr. Kelly has in fact moved. He still lives in Gleneagles Village, but a little further away from us than when he wrote his submission. He raises 4 key points which I'd like to address. The first one, the area being much too busy. Well, Dunbar Court is a quiet and tranquil area, and as a cul-de-sac, it has no through traffic. I would contend that the current use of the property as a short-term let is beneficial to the general level of busyness, as our occupancy rate averages around 35% a year. By contrast, if my husband and I were to chose to live in the property as our main residence, then the daily comings and goings would be much more considerable than they are as a holiday let. The level of busyness is not driven by the relatively small number of short-term lets in the village, but very much driven by the activities of the Gleneagles Hotel and the Championship golf courses. It's promoted as the glorious playground. The hotel can accommodate more than 500 people. Their conference facility has more than 2,000 people. And particularly at weekends, heaven knows how many day trippers there are who enjoy the cafe, bars and restaurants that are nearby. And during times of major golfing competitions, then I would agree with Mr. Kelly that the area does get very busy indeed. Over 22,000 people attended the Men's Open in 2022, and the Solheim Cup in 2019 attracted more than 90,000 spectators to this area. So my view there is that my small holiday let with our occupancy of 2 people does little to contribute to the general business of the area. His next point, there being no car parking as groups are coming and taking over. My assessment of Dunbar Court is that there's about enough space for each property to park 1 car roughly outside of their house. And some permanent residents have as many as 3 cars. You've heard me say already our occupancy is around 35%. Most of our visitors, when they arrive, they only come in 1 car. In fact, some of them don't have a car at all. They arrive by air or by train. So I would contend that, again, the use of the property as a short-term let actually helps the parking situation for our fellow neighbours. His third point relates to antisocial behaviour, drunkenness and extreme noise and pollution, all of which combine to reducing our amenity and that of our neighbours. Well, in the 4.5 years that we've been operating at Gleneagles Village, we've not received a single complaint from any neighbour about the conduct of our guests. And I would have thought that if our guests had been a nuisance, Mr. Kelly would have made that known to us. And presumably other neighbours who may also have been exercised by any levels of noise, then they too would have put in an objection, and you'll be aware that they haven't. We are acutely aware of the risk that lively guests may cause a nuisance to neighbours, although given the comments that we receive from our guests, most appreciate the peace and tranquility that Dunbar Court offers. We remind our guests in their arrival information and in the welcome pack in the house that Gleneagles Village is special and ask that they are considerate to our neighbours, especially when they're returning to the property late at night. I might add that the house is almost always returned to us in immaculate condition. I think it would be a rather odd juxtaposition for a client to act thoughtfully towards us and the exact opposite towards our neighbours. Mr. Kelly then observes short-term guests driving cars too fast. Well, I've never witnessed cars being driven too fast, but to be fair to Mr. Kelly, he lives there all the time. And so perhaps he's in a better position to comment, but I should explain that Dunbar Court is a cul-de-sac. It has a roundabout in the middle, and I find it very hard to see how anybody could conceivably drive a car at speed, given the layout of the road. And neither am I really sure how Mr. Kelly knows that any such speeding cars may be driven by short-term let clients and not by perhaps visitors to neighbours, or indeed frustrated visitors to the hotel who may be looking for somewhere to park. Again, I've never had any complaints from Mr. Kelly or any other neighbours about speeding cars. There's another point in Mr. Kelly's letter at the end where he references the title deeds, and certainly it's my understanding that there is no restriction within the title deeds to prevent the property from being used as a short-term let. And this was a point on which we sought assurance from our lawyer when we bought the property. Overall, I'd class Mr. Kelly's objections as being what I could perhaps describe as general comments about short-term lets. And this may perhaps support an inferred view on his part that he'd prefer that there be no short-term let properties in Gleneagles Village at all. He doesn't cite a single example where our guests have contributed to his concerns. And I also thought it was notable in his submission that he makes 3 references to groups of people. In everyday parlance, I would take a group of people to mean at least 3. And as you're already aware, the occupancy of our property is a maximum of 2. So in my view, doesn't constitute a group. So I can't help maybe wondering if his concerns are coloured by those properties capable of putting up a larger number of people. I hope I provided the committee with a fair and well-balanced response to Mr. Kelly's objections, and of course I'd be happy to address any further questions you may have of us. Mick, are there any points you would wish to add?
Thank you, Mrs. Oak. Do members have any questions for Mrs. Oak? Councillor Braun.
Thank you, Mrs. Oak, for your presentation. A very concise one. Thank you very much. You mentioned that you managed the property completely yourselves. So am I to assume then you live reasonably local to it, the first question? And the second part, do the neighbours have your contact details if there are any problems?
So we live in Stirling, so that's about 25 minutes away. So yes, we can get up there if there's ever a need to do so. And when we go away on holiday ourselves, we don't rent the property out so that we can be available and on hand. And the second point is that, yes, our immediate neighbours do have our telephone number.
Thank you. Are there any further questions for Mrs. Oak? Don't see anything online, so thank you, Mrs. Oak. Could I invite you, Mrs. Oak, to sum up, please?
Yeah, no, I have relatively little to add other than to say that I feel that the points that Mr. Kelly has made are in the main a general point. They're not specific to our property. And I feel that the way that we run it means that we're not contributing to, in any meaningful way, to the kinds of issues that he raises.
Thank you, Mrs. Oak. Do members wish to adjourn for further discussion? No. My motion, therefore, is to grant the application for a short-term let, subject to the conditions laid out in the paper. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Are there any amendments to the motion? If there are no amendments to the motion is therefore carried and your licence has been accepted. Members, this is an application for a short-term licence. Members, this application is on page 43 onwards of your documentation pack. For this item of business, we are joined on the phone, in person by the applicant. This application has been brought to committee today as one objection was received from Peter Kelly, who is not present today. I will now hand over to Moyna McLaren, who will introduce the report and advise on the procedures for the hearing.
This is an application for three-year short-term let licence. The host has been operating prior to October 2002, and the application has not been objected to by Police Scotland or the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service. In this case, the objector will not be attending today, and the committee has, I'll just ask the committee, you've had a chance to consider the objection. Yes, and the committee has considered the context of the objection. So what is left to be done is to hear your presentation in relation to application and in response to the objection. And then after that, you be asked questions by the committee, and there'll be a small opportunity for you to sum up before the decision is made. Thank you.
Thank you. Could I now invite Ms Stewart to provide details of the application and respond to the objection?
Good morning. I've got a property at 40 Dunbar Court in Gleneagles, and it's a lovely little property, and we have lots of lovely guests. And it's a 2-bedroom property, and all our clientele is couples, since it's only for 2 people, and they're usually there for a tranquil, quiet time. A lot of my guests arrive by train or the fly, so they're taxied to the property. So we don't normally have a lot of cars, and if we do have cars, we normally have 1 car, since it's usually a couple. Things such as antisocial behaviour and drunkenness, I have never heard of that, not just with holiday rentals, but with people that live there permanently. That type of area, that really doesn't go on. And it's quite a quiet, nice, happy place for people to come to and people to live in. And on the whole, in this area, we all generally get on very well, and we've all got contact with each other. And if there was any problems, somebody would definitely, we're also friendly, somebody would definitely say. So what Mr. Kelly is saying about parking and noise and nuisance, as far as I can see, I haven't heard or seen anything about anything like that. And from my reviews, we can see that most people comment when they come to the village to say how nice and quiet the area actually is. So I just feel that having a holiday rental there, I think it is actually benefiting the area and bringing tourism to the area as well. So that's really my case with it all. I don't really have anything else to say. And about the parking as well, Mr. Kelly, he doesn't actually live there permanently. That is his holiday home. So when he comes up for weekends to stay or weeks to stay, he does bring his car. His wife brings a car, and they've actually got 2 nannies. So there's actually 4 cars there at weekends and at holiday time. So that sometimes takes up our spaces, but we are very tolerant and good natured. So
Thank you. Do members have any questions for Ms Stewart? Councillor Allen, followed by.
Good morning, and thanks for your representation there. Just to get a bit of clarity on something you said at the outset, you said it's a 2-bedroomed.
a 1-bedroom for 2 people. Sorry.
Councillor Brown.
Success. Thank you for your presentation this morning. You didn't mention who manages the property and how that's handled. Surprisingly, it's the same question as before. So do you manage it, or do you have a management company doing it? And do the local neighbours have the contact details for that if there are problems?
I manage the property myself, and I do a lot of the changeovers myself, but I also have somebody in the area that there was any problems that could be called upon, and also they do help with cleaning and outdoor maintenance as well. I also have contact with several neighbours in Dunbar Court.
Thank you. Are there any further questions for Ms Stewart? I don't see anything online. If there are no further questions for Ms Stewart, could I please invite you to sum up?
I don't really have much else to say. I just feel like I try very hard to keep the property as lovely as possible, keep guests happy, residents happy, and hope that I'm bringing something to the Gleneagles area and give people a nice experience. Yeah.
Thank you. Do members wish to adjourn for further discussion? If members don't wish to adjourn, my motion is to grant the application for a short-term let license subject to the conditions within the paper. Do I have a seconder?
I'll second.
Are there any amendments to the motion? If there are no amendments to the motion, the license is granted. Thank you. You granted your license.
Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Members, I'm going to ask if you agree to vary the order of business to your item 9, of which is a short-term let license number PK 11790P. If we're all agreed, we now move on to members, we're now moving on to paper 9. This application is on page 105 onwards in your documentation pack. For this item of business, we're joined in the chambers by the applicant, Deirdre Barron. We're also joined in the chamber by objectors. I'm sorry. Okay, to continue, for this item of business, we're joined in the chamber by the applicant, Deirdre Barron. We're also joined in the chambers by objectors to the application, Donald Graham and Fergus Purdy. 2 further objections were received from Judith Bell and Karen Jones, who are not present today. I will now hand over to Moira McLaren, who will introduce the report and advise on the procedures for the hearing.
This application for short-term lets has not been objected to by the police or the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service, and it's for a 3-year licence. In terms of the procedure, what will happen is that you'll be able to present your objections first, and once your objection is presented, the committee can ask question, and then the second objection, speak to the second objection, and then the committee can ask questions. And then what will happen after that is the applicant will be given an opportunity to present their reason why they're applying for the short-term let, and also to respond to the objections. The applicant, yourself, will be asked questions, and then at the end of all of this, you'll be given a brief opportunity to summarise your position individually, and then the applicant, you'll be able to, as an applicant, be able to summarise your position, and then the committee will consider the application at that point.
Thank you. I would like to advise Mr. Graham and Mr. Purdy, the licensing committee have received and thoroughly reviewed a copy of all objections prior to this meeting. It is requested that you keep your explanation to your objection to no more than 10 minutes. Additional grounds for objection or representation should not be added at this time. Only the grounds of objection and representations included in your initial submission may be referenced. Could I please invite Mr. Graham to provide details of his objection?
Thank you. I've very little to say. I would make a statement that I'm 85 and my wife is younger. We moved to Perth in 2006, having lived in 9 different locations in Britain. The community atmosphere here at Fiscal's House is vital. Having different occupants in flat G perhaps daily, with access to Rome is discomforting. And like most residents, I see no reason for allowing short-term lets at this location. The deed of conditions are very clear, and if you will allow me, I will distribute copies of the two specific conditions. May I pass? This is just one page. May I suggest? Can I? What?
I was wondering if it was possible to get some legal advice from the Solicitor Moynihan Claren regarding the deeds and whether they're competent for this committee.
Yes, and unfortunately, the committee is unable to consider title deeds if there is sort of a breach of if you consider there's a breach of the title deeds. This would be a matter that you would have to take up with your solicitor, and it would be sort of a civil issue. But in terms of granting the license, the status of the title deeds is not a part of what would be considered by the committee.
May I just respond by saying the deed of conditions is the reason for having this objection. The deed of conditions are very, very clear in that they say categorically that it is the properties are not to be subdivided or occupied other than a dwelling house for one family only. This is the deed of conditions.
Mr. Graham, I do apologise, but unfortunately we're not, as one has just outlined, the deeds of your property and any breaches of those deeds are a civil matter and not really a matter for this committee, I'm afraid. Okay, so I do apologise.
Thank you. I hear what you have to say, yes.
If you would like to continue an objection, but I'm sorry we can't take anything with reference to the deeds.
No, I have nothing further to add.
Before we get to Mr. Purdy, do members have any questions for Mr. Graham? Councillor Braun.
Thank you, Mr. Graham, for your presentation. I'm looking at the list from your letter, and most of it does deal with the deeds, but the one point you do make is about the safety and the security of keys. I don't know if you could elaborate a bit more on that for us, because you didn't mention that at all in your deputation.
I understand the visitors to the property are met by the owner and given keys, and then they have free access to the building and to roam in the building. We are on the top floor as a matter of interest and feel very secure up there, or have felt very secure up there.
Thank you. Are there any further questions for Mr. Graham? If there are no further questions for Mr. Graham, could I please invite Mr. Purdy to provide details of his objection? Thank you.
Thank you. To put it into context, and I acknowledge your response regarding the title, but the consequences of someone running a business does have an impact. So therefore, whilst this is not a material consideration legally, there's the consequences of running that business, both in terms of the occupation, terms and conditions, and also the management. Fiscal's house is a closed block, as it were, self-contained, has its own entrance, functions on a daily basis by neighbours cooperating and participating in the running of that building. And that essentially comes down to including recycling, which may not be a high priority, but it's an important one, particularly in the direction Perth and Kinross are going in terms of recycling. So the management of what rubbish goes where and when that rubbish is removed and when that rubbish is put out for collection is the responsibility of each owner. An absentee owner does not contribute to the functioning of the building. Because of the age of the property, we also have to consider the running of the heating system. It's a district heating. It does have glitches, so the responsibility again lies on those who are owner occupiers to ensure it's proper running on a daily basis, which can be disruptive. So therefore, there is a unified and community aspect to this building. It's not our terraces, it's not in a street, it's essentially a community. We also have regular meetings whereby we try to discuss how we look after the building, maintain it, and how it runs. And that again requires participation, which in this instance is lacking. In terms of security that you raised earlier, there are occasions where if you don't know the building, it's getting like to know a car. If you're short-term late, we've found the door off the snib because they've gone out for a smoke, which is at least appreciated that they don't smoke in the hallway. But there have been evidence of cigarette butts. So for us, it becomes an issue where it's a burden, and essentially we end up being caretakers. We want to do it for a community, but it does become difficult when we're supporting a business. And so for us, that is a heavy and significant material consideration. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Purdy. Do members have any questions for Mr. Purdy? I don't see any questions coming forward, so Mr. Purdy, I think you've got off there. Could I please now invite Ms. Barron to provide details of the application and respond to the objection?
Good morning. Can you hear me okay? Yes. Okay. My name is Deirdre Barron. This is my flat we're discussing. The flat is indeed my only property. I myself live in rented accommodation 20 minutes from Perth. I've run this as a short-term let since July 2022, so almost 2 years. The revenue from this short-term letting is a main part of my income and my livelihood. I am a responsible person and I have been working in hotels and hospitality all of my life. I am very much hands-on and deal with all the bookings to the property, all the turnovers, cleaning, bookkeeping, all aspects of running this property. As my neighbours have said, I do meet all guests personally at the property. All guests are vetted prior to booking. The flat has 1 bedroom and I take 1 person or 2 guests. No children, no pets. With the Airbnb platform I use, each guest I receive has been reviewed by previous hosts. Any red flags being raised regarding a booking, I decline immediately. On arrival, my initial chats with the guests, it's made clear what I expect from them staying in my flat, such as being aware of my neighbours, being respectful, no noise, the use of bins, recycling. I have a no smoking policy, obviously, in the flat, the building, or anywhere around the building. And I have documentation, a welcome pack in the flat, which contains my house rules, which must be adhered to. Entry to my flat is only 3 or 4 steps inside the main door. Therefore, guests do not use the lift or common stairs or pass any other front doors. Therefore, there is no requirement for them to be wandering around the building, as entry is right inside the front door. I do understand that my neighbours have concerns. I get that. I try my best to live in harmony with my neighbours. I always play as much as I can a full part in the management of the building. We are at the moment having some issues with our central heating system. So 2 weeks ago, we had Zoom meetings where this was discussed. I attended those Zoom meetings, as I always do. I accept that my guests are new to the area and may not be known to the existing residents. However, even residents in the building will not know some of their neighbours or visitors to the building. Tradesmen, delivery drivers, visitors are all being let into the building by our buzzer system from their flats. These people coming from outside are just as much a security risk as anyone using my flat, and potentially more so. I am not aware of any of my guests causing any unsocial noise or disturbance to neighbours, although I have had that levelled at me, but with no documentation or evidence to back that up. Most people coming to the flat are couples. They're here for a quiet, relaxing time, to spend some time in Perth, use the restaurants, other facilities. And it can be just as likely that noise will come from other flats and outside of the building, which I have experienced as we're in the city centre. If I were to let the flat out on a long-term basis, I may get a tenant who does cause noise and disturbance to my neighbours and have difficulty getting them to vacate the flat. Lastly, I would just like to say that last year, in fact, even this year as well, a large number of guests are coming from overseas, spending time in Perth and the surrounding area, bringing much needed overseas money into Scotland, into our local restaurants, shops, visitor attractions, cafes. These businesses are in dire need of the trade that tourists bring. I also get guests coming for work or for study or relocating to Perth. And I believe my holiday let also supports my other small businesses, such as my plumber, my painter, my cleaner, my electrician, and all of this goes to boost the vitality of our city. That's all I have to say, really, and thank you for your time today.
Thank you. Do members have any questions for Ms Barron?
Success. Thank you for your presentation. Just a quick clarification. You say you do all the running and the cleaning yourself. Do the neighbours have your contact details? My usual question this morning, I think. So can they contact you if there are any problems?
Sorry, some of them do, but I'll make sure that everyone does. Yes.
Mr Allen?
Thank you, Convener. Thank you for your deputation there. Can you just help me understand about the booking system and how it is that you can vet all of your clients? Thank you.
When any guests stay in my flat, I have to give them a review, which will be read by other hosts prior to them booking my guests. So the same for me. If someone requests to book, I can see how long they've been on Airbnb and how many reviews they've had. I can read every review from a previous host, letting me know how their guests were.
Thank you for that. So how would I be reviewed if I was a first-time user?
All my bookings at the moment come through Airbnb. So if you are a first-time user, you may not have any reviews. I will ask you why you're coming to Perth, you know, who you're bringing with you, and what you expect to be doing locally. That you're also have been verified by Airbnb, your email, your identification, it's all on there for me. So I would know something about you.
Councillor Stewart?
Thank you, convener. Can I ask your occupancy rate, please?
Because I'm relatively new, I don't have an awful lot of repeats, and business has been a little bit quiet over the winter, but I would say bookings are picking up now. So I allow people to stay for a minimum of 2 nights. So sometimes during a week, I might only get people staying on a Friday or a Saturday, or I have had some bookings at the moment for people coming for 2 weeks. Someone coming in for 2 weeks next week because she's moving to Perth for her job. So I don't have an actual percentage for you.
Thank you. I feel I should have 2 mics here. My question is about the day-to-day management, and the objectors have identified a number of concerns they have about the property and how it's possibly being managed. Could you just outline how you manage the property on a day-to-day basis? Do you drop in out the blue, or?
If I don't have anyone staying in the property, I'm usually there 2 or 3 times a week just to check that everything's okay. If I have people in the property, then I can message them to ask if everything's okay. I can pop in if I have any concerns myself. I'm only 20 minutes away. I think, like the previous people who've been in front of you, we have, our guests are very quiet. They're coming for a quiet holiday. If you have a look online, most of my reviews are 5-star as well. It's my property. I want to make sure it's looked after property, and I'm very aware of my neighbours in the building as well. I'd be horrified to cause them any disturbance, honestly.
One further question. You say you advertise on Airbnb, and I was just wondering, could you let us know what Airbnb policies are regarding antisocial behaviour within the property? So you say that if people have got a 5-star review, but what happens if people don't have that 5-star review? How do Airbnb manage that on your behalf?
If I encounter any issues in the flat, the people would be asked to leave. And I don't think I get the clientele that would be making many issues. It's 1 or 2 people. It's not a party flat. And I think Airbnb are very aware of that now, with the history of things that have gone on perhaps in Edinburgh. And I think they're maybe more on top of it now as well.
Are there any further questions for Ms. Barron? Councillor Braun.
Yes, thanks, Mayor. Just sort of coming back on one point. One of the concerns was the security of the building with strangers in there. Is there anything in the paperwork that you can reassure other occupants with the paperwork for your guests to reassure them about their security? Because obviously they're concerned. Some of the residents may be elderly, if you pardon the expression, and they're obviously concerned about their security with people in the building. So is there anything within the documentation that you can stress to your guests, to stay on the ground floor and not to wander the building? I mean, obviously it's a concern for other residents, as you can appreciate.
A compact outlining these sort of things. Yes, definitely. And about noise and considering my neighbours and security of the keys. They're told what to do with the keys and where to leave them.
Okay, are there any further questions for Ms. Barron? If there are no further questions, I don't see anything online. If there are no further questions for Ms. Graham, could I please invite Mr. Graham to sum up, please?
Frankly, Mr. Chairman, I've really got very little that I can usefully add. I've made the case. Most of the residents, in fact, all of the residents that I know, object to this application, but unfortunately they're not here today. Although they have verbally said to us that they certainly object. I've really no more I can add usefully. So I'd like to pass over to my neighbour.
Okay, I was going to ask therefore, Mr. Purdy, could you please sum up for me?
Briefly, because I've obviously verbally outlined the objection, is the implications of us supporting a business. We can't really enforce or police the building. We have to just deal with the circumstances as and when they arise. Sometimes that can be daily, could be weekly, monthly, and certainly annually. So at this moment in time, there are concerns, albeit it's one Airbnb, it's a business. But the arguments of economy, spending time, money, what about wellness? It's a self-contained block and therefore has a degree of, it's not insular, but it's a neighbourhood, it's a community, and this is a thin end of a wedge for that community. So I would just again reiterate the fact that we're not here to support a business, we're here to support a community. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Purdy. Could I invite Ms. Barron to sum up, please?
I don't really have anything further to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Do members wish to adjourn for further discussion? Yes. Okay, so we'll now adjourn the meeting for 5 or 10 minutes for further discussion. Could I invite members who are online to join us in the breakout room? My motion is to grant the license subject to the conditions outlined within the paper. Do I have a seconder?
I'll second.
Thank you. Are there any amendments to the motion?
Could I have a moment, please, convener? Convener, I'd like to put an amendment to refuse the application on the legal position stated in our papers, paragraph C, point 1.
Thank you, Councillor Stewart. Do you have a seconder?
I'm happy to second as well.
Thank you. I'll now hand over to the clerk to carry out a roll call vote.
Thank you, convener. Firstly, can I check, Councillor Harvey, did you miss some of the discussion before committee adjourned?
No, I heard all the discussion. I didn't get into the breakout room. That was all.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Members, when I call your name, please let me know if you're voting for the motion to grant the application or the amendment to refuse the application. Councillor Allen.
Amendment.
Councillor Anderson. I'll come back. Councillor Braun.
Amendment.
Councillor Carr.
Motion.
Councillor Chan.
Amendment.
Councillor Harvey.
Motion.
Councillor McPherson.
Motion.
Councillor Robertson.
Motion.
Councillor Stewart.
Amendment.
Bailey Williamson.
Motion.
Councillor Anderson. He joined the meeting late and he was here for the discussion, but
He was still in the breakout room the last time I saw.
Will we just move on, convener? Will I confirm? We have 5 votes for the motion and 4 for the amendment, and therefore the motion to grant will carry.
Thank you very much. Therefore, your licence has been granted, but do Councillor Brown would just like to make a recommendation.
Thanks, convener. Ms. Brown, just going on from the comments for the objectors, may I make a suggestion that you do check your title deeds to see that you have permission to rent? I think to avoid any future problems, but I'll leave that with you to check. Yeah, okay.
Okay, thank you very much, everybody. Thank you for your attendance. Thank you.